2 years ago, I put out a video ranking my 15 rarest roller coaster credits. At the time, I had been on 447 different roller coasters. Now, I've been on 791. So clearly it's time for an update, also because I didn't like how I structured that list. There's two very different ways you can measure a rare roller coaster, either based on its geographic location or unreliability or some other factor that determines how little coverage it gets as a result, or the type of ride it is and how little that coaster model has been produced. Last time I did this, there was a weird blend of rides from each of these criterias, and so what I'll be doing now is I'll create two separate videos. This one will focus on those coasters that are remote or unreliable and get little discussion among social media, but in the next one, I'll go over the rarest coaster by model and genre, and I plan to title that the top most unique roller coasters I've ridden. There's certainly a handful of coasters that are rare as a result of both of these things, but I'm going to meticulously choose 10 unique coasters that most accurately fit each list. Also, a part of this video will be a handful of outliers that don't fall under either category. These are rides that only a small handful will ever get to experience due to a variety of unusual circumstances. One last thing, I know I've been rambling for a while, I've decided to exclude mountain and alpine coasters from this list. Due to their often remote locations, I believe those would take up the majority of the spots on here. Still, I did want to give a few honorable mentions of those I'm most proud to have under my belt. Starting in Switzerland, we have three I want to briefly mention. Rodelbahn Prataschier is technically the longest roller coaster I've ever ridden at more than 10,000 feet of track. It's also the third longest alpine coaster in the world. Rodelplausch is the only single rail mountain coaster I've been on. This one is crazy. You take a funicular to the top and ride back down on what feels like an accident waiting to happen. Alpine Coaster at Glacier 3000 is the highest elevated alpine coaster in the world according to the roller coaster database. It also might be the most expensive coaster credit I have because getting to it alone requires an $80 gondola ride, not to mention 10 extra to ride the dang thing. Over in America, I've been fortunate enough to experience the only mountain coasters in a variety of states. This includes the Cowboy Coaster at Snow King Mountain Resort in Wyoming, Rushmore Mountain Coaster at Rush Mountain Adventure Park in South Dakota, Glade Runner at Bogus Basin Recreation Area in Idaho, and Canyon Coaster at Canyon Coaster Adventure Park in Arizona. Alright, now that we have all of that out of the way, let's dive into my top 10 rarest roller coaster credits. Number 10, Heisefahrt at Wild und Freizeitpark Kloten in Kloten, Germany. Heisefahrt is the only roller coaster from Europe that made my list, mainly because almost all of the parks I've been to on that continent are highly established. This is one of the few small parks I went out of my way to visit, and it's a very cool place. In part because of its location on top of a mountain in rural Germany, another contributing factor to its top 10 ranking. The ride is awesome too. Manufactured by Gerstlauer, it's a unique take on a wild mouse with lots of whippy transitions and airtime hills. It's tons of fun, it's got an incredible setting, and it's in a pretty remote location. Number 9, Blue Streak at Conneaut Lake Park in Conneaut Lake, Pennsylvania. Blue Streak is the first of a few defunct roller coasters that made the cut, having operated from 1938 to 2019. I was so lucky to ride it in its final year of operation, and it's such a shame to have lost another vintage wooden roller coaster. The ride shut down after years, if not decades, of financial troubles, meaning it never got a lot of visitors to begin with. So not only is it impossible to experience nowadays, but back when it was around, I don't think there were a whole lot of enthusiasts that made the trek to rural Pennsylvania to ride it. And it sucks because the layout was quite good. I think if they had the finance to smoothen it out and replace the trains, we'd be looking at a fantastic wood coaster. Number 8, Pteranodon Flyers at Universal's Islands of Adventure in Orlando, Florida. It goes without saying that small kids coasters wouldn't qualify to make this list, so what makes Pteranodon Flyers different? Personally, even as an adult, I feel like I'd be able to get some enjoyment out of this ride, which is why I think it's so incredibly bizarre that they prohibit anyone who isn't a child from riding it. Well, unless you're a parent, which confirms that adults could safely experience this attraction if they allowed it. Luckily, I grew up going to the parks in Orlando, and I know I got this credit as a kid, but I still feel for those who might never get to ride it due to arbitrary park policy. All it would take is for Universal to reverse this decision, and suddenly a lot more people would be able to ride what is so obviously a family coaster. Number 7, Insomnio at Cataplume in Mexico City, Mexico. When I visited Mexico's capital city in 2021, it was primarily to visit their Six Flags park, although there was another much smaller park I was eyeing as well. Cataplume is a pretty awesome place actually, and it's got one of the most unique locations I've ever seen for a theme park. They put this place on top of a shopping mall, and their signature roller coaster Insomnio takes advantage of this by flinging riders out over the edge of the building. It's only for a second or two, but while it lasts, it's pretty cool, and it's for that alone why I think more enthusiasts should come here if they plan on visiting the area. Number 6, Big Timber Log Ride at Enchanted Forest in Turner, Oregon. In my opinion, this one could have made it into either of these two lists, as it's not only a ride I hear little about, but it's also a very unique attraction. Here's the thing though, Enchanted Forest has another coaster that's even more unusual, so rather than putting both in the next video, I was able to include one in each. Though Enchanted Forest is a very cool park, no one is traveling to the Pacific Northwest strictly for roller coasters. Heck, calling Big Timber Log Ride a roller coaster at all is a stretch. The only thing differentiating it from your average log flume is it's got one large coaster dip towards the end of the ride. But since it's on the roller coaster database, I may as well count it as a coaster credit, but it's really on the fence. Number 5, Dania Beach Hurricane at Boomers in Dania, Florida. Similar to Pteranodon Flyers, this is one of those coaster credits I miraculously got as a kid, and even more coincidental is I rode it in its last year of operation in 2011. As a coaster enthusiast, I've always found this ride to be quite interesting, not only because I got to ride it, but because it was the largest roller coaster in South Florida for the 11 years it was operating. It was also the largest coaster ever installed at a Boomers, where the norm is typically a coaster for kids. The Dania Beach Hurricane was far from a kid's ride, and according to the few enthusiasts that got to experience it, it actually had some pretty good airtime. When this coaster closed due to financial troubles, it was especially upsetting since the region didn't and still doesn't have anything to counter it with. Hopefully one day we'll see the return of a large-scale roller coaster in the Miami area. Number 4, Raton Loco at Mundo Divertido in Tijuana, Mexico. After years of trying to ride every roller coaster in my home region of Southern California, there was one ride that would always come up on the near you section of coaster count, and it wasn't in SoCal at all. It was actually located in Tijuana, Mexico, often considered one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Was I really about to cross the border for a wild mouse and a wacky worm? You bet I was, and a couple friends of mine planned a day trip out of it too. Honestly, the areas we went to in Tijuana didn't feel unsafe at all, and the park was decent for what it was. They used to have a much larger coaster called Montaña Rusa that I would have much preferred to travel for, but nonetheless, Raton Loco takes the number 4 spot on this list. Number 3, Bullet at Selva Mágica in Guadalajara, Mexico. Remaining in the same country, we head to Mexico's second largest city for what is my proudest roller coaster credit to date. Bullet was a highly sought after coaster for me, and it continues to be for lots of other people since it's the last remaining ride of its kind in the world. Like Big Timber Log Ride, it technically would have qualified for either list, but I think it's the obscure location and unreliability of this attraction that makes it so difficult to get on. Bullet was popularized by El Toro Ryan when he visited Mexico in 2019, and unfortunately for him, he found the ride closed for maintenance. This has scared a lot of coaster enthusiasts away from even attempting to ride it. For example, I remember asking Taylor from Coaster Studios if he'd planned to do it on his own Mexico trip, to which he responded he didn't want to risk getting there only for it to be closed. Now, it's to my understanding that Bullet's open more than some may think, but by nature, with it being such a unique and rare attraction, it tends to open late and will have spurts of downtime. It was a blast to ride though, and I'm certainly very appreciative I got on it. Oh, and on the off chance Ryan is watching this video, I genuinely hope you get to experience it someday. Number 2, Brava at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art in North Adams, Massachusetts. A museum with a rideable roller coaster? You heard that right, and this is the only one in the world that has one. That said, I think it's far more accurate to look at Brava as an art exhibit. Every ride emulates a theater performance where you emerge from the curtains and those watching from the ground clap once you complete the layout. Artist E.J. Hill designed it this way with the use of a single car that can run with one person, get this, every hour. Throughout the coaster's 18-month run, only around 2,000 people will ever get to experience it, and if you were hoping to ride Brava after hearing about it in this video, it's only around for another week before it closes forever. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. After all, I would have loved to experience it more than once, but I just appreciate that I got that one ride at all, because this is easily one of the rarest coaster credits of all time. And I almost placed it at the number 1 spot, but by a hair, I've decided to give that title to the Axis prototype at SNS Worldwide in Logan, Utah. The reason I think this is my rarest roller coaster credit is you can only experience it via invite. Brava may have been difficult to get on, but that was still a publicly available attraction. When I rode Axis in 2020, I had a fraction of the following I have now and was in no position to reach out to SNS to see if I could come out and experience it. I owe this one entirely to my good friend Josiah from National Coasters, who invited me to join him that day, and I still think after everything I've experienced as a coaster enthusiast, this was one of the coolest things I've ever done. Not to mention, Axis is just an incredible design, and all of the elements demonstrated on the prototype felt different from any other roller coaster I've ridden. It may have taken longer than expected, but we finally have our first full-size Axis on the way for 2025, and I for one could not be more excited about what SNS has up their sleeves. But with that, thank you so much for watching today's video counting down the 10 rarest roller coaster credits I've experienced. I'd love to hear in the comments what your rarest coasters are and which ones are on your bucket list. One I've always wanted to do is Desperado at Buffalo Bills in Primm, Nevada, just because of its location. Why a hotel and casino thought it would be a good idea to build the tallest roller coaster in the world out in the middle of a desert, I don't know, but it's certainly very unique. I was just days away from riding Desperado in 2019 before it shut indefinitely, and more than 4 years later, it's still yet to reopen. From what I've heard, we might be seeing a return in the coming months, but I'll believe it when I see it. If you enjoyed today's video, feel free to drop a like and subscribe to Coaster Dash so you don't miss any content like this in the future. Until next time, I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.